Welcome back to another episode, another podcast. Today is another special one. An absolute legend. I know a lot of people either watching or listening will know this guy straight away. It's TK from Talking League, the NRL fantasy podcast. Funnily enough, we sort of, I didn't say start at the same time, but we're sort of around the same period. We were talking a lot at the start about how to organize channels, the best way to go about things. So it's good to actually, it's the first time I've probably met on a video. So it's great to talk, TK. The channel is doing fantastic. I love it. Give yourself a quick plug and let us know about if for some reason someone's been living under a rock, what they can find at the channel.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Thanks for inviting me on, mate. Really excited to have a chat. Like you said, probably known each other for about 3 years, so talk a little bit regularly, but first time we've actually been doing anything like this. So pretty excited to be here. But yeah, thanks for the plug, mate. So Talking League, it's one of those things that we do NRL fantasy, but we also do like things like betting. Like we're not niche at all. We just kind of like having a bit of fun, and there's 12 of us that do it, and we got 5 different shows spread across the week. So pretty much something for everyone across the week. Today, we're recording on a Wednesday, and tonight it's called Wacky Wednesday. So it's a little bit more of a loose show that Andy does with a few of the boys. But Tuesday's the main show, of course, after the TLT. I do my own kind of wrap on a Sunday, and then the boys do a live Q&A from Facebook, which is always great to mix with all the different punters on a Thursday night. And the boys also do a punting show on Wednesday night as well. So plenty there. So all you got to do is just Talking Leagues. Pretty simple to find across all the podcast apps. But yeah, thanks for letting me have a little plug there, Joel.
Yeah, no worries at all. And then when this is uploaded, it'll be tagged as well. So guys, go ahead and please give them a like, follow, subscribe, whatever you can. It's definitely much appreciated. Let's get stuck into it though. We're here to talk some fantasy, and me personally, I'm a bit all over the shop, so I need your help more than ever. And I know a lot of probably people out there too as well. Fantasy. Now we want to go by positions for this. We want to just talk and have you help us out with sort of the run home. We're getting into finals. It's a pretty important time for the fantasy players out there playing head-to-head, playing the comps, things like that. Let's start from wing fullback and work our way up, shall we? So Can you please point us in the direction of some of these must-haves at the wing fullback?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because the run home is always important. We're going to get 8 extra trades at the start of round 20 as well. So probably my advice there, don't try to spend them all, especially early on, because even though that it's going to be 8 in 8 weeks, like we all see the suspensions and injuries and all the little things that happen in rugby league, off-field stuff, and all of a sudden you have a gun player that might be stood down for a little while. So I would probably, in terms of wing fullbacks, just having a look at this, and it's been one of those positions, Joel, that in previous years wing fullbacks have been so strong, but at the moment we're kind of probably struggling to find a little bit of consistency. The player that I'm probably targeting and that I don't have at the moment, because I've picked my wing fullbacks really well during this origin period because I got the likes of Chance and also got Scotty Drinkwater and Kalen Ponga with his return back to fullback. So 3 guys that are pretty much in the top 5 guys over this kind of last little stretch of 5 to 6 games. And then, of course, Dream Buller as well. Picked him up nice and early, which was also a cash grab. But, of course, with Brooksy being injured and a few others like Appy as well, there's no doubt there's going to be a lot of pressure on Dream Buller to continue those numbers, which, considering that he's gone from probably their 3rd best player in terms of their attacking structure to now being their main man here, I think he's going to struggle a little bit. So I think he might peak out, which means that we probably do need to sell him out. So probably do recommend that we do keep the likes of Chance. The 3 that I did mention, Chance, Drinky, and then also Pongs. I think they're all keepers moving forward. The guys I'll probably add one more, and that's the trade for Buller. And there's 2 guys I think you can consider. And the one that I really want is Dylan Edwards. He just hits base stats for just fun. He's also about 100K off the peak of his pricing, about round 8. And I just like the fact that Penrith are first in the comp. They're going to probably go deep in a run. The only concern I've got is that Cleary does have a tendency to rest their players. So just make sure that you do have a backup. I think it's only going to be 1 game, but considering how heavy they are for Origin players and then kind of how far ahead they're kind of getting again, that I think they do have a ability to kind of rest at least 1 game for all their kind of star players moving forward. The other one that I'm really looking at is Ruben Garrick. Now, I didn't get him over the bye period because essentially I thought he was going to get parked onto the wing, but the news with Tommy Turbo doing his pec gone for the year, I think it really does open up Ruben Garrick to really have a really great end of the season. Like we saw in that game last week against the Storm, how he's a first-grade fullback. So, and I think there's some stuff that he does better than Turbo. I think he's a better defensive fullback than Turbo. There's no doubt that Turbo is one of the best attacking players in our game. But in terms of he defended 2 try saves last week that a lot of fullbacks would not get to last week with Ruben Garrick. So in terms of Manly maybe going on a run to end the season to try and sneak into the 8, I think that him and DCE will be very important as a combination. So I can definitely see some upside value in someone like Ruben Garrick. Also the team goal kicker as well, right, Joel? So you're going to get those additional points. So they're probably the 2 that I will be having a look at moving forward.
Well, I'm already starting to feel a little bit better because you mentioned a number of players here that are already in my team. So I'm on the right track early here. So I'll probably get shot back down quite early, but we'll see how we go. A player that I'll ask you a question about for that position, which I feel like has been scoring quite well lately, but Parramatta still have a couple of buys in hand. One of them is this week, is Gutho. Is he in any sort of real possibility to get into a team, or is it sort of it's gone now, you feel like?
No, it's an interesting one. The thing with Gutho is he's going to thrive during this period, right? Weakened teams. It's not that, I know that he gets tagged as saying like he's a flat track bully and all this sort of stuff, but Gutho is a real try scorer with great energy, right? So in terms of like what they call him in the fantasy world, especially if you're new and you're listening at the moment, is you become a pod, so a player of difference. So that's essentially kind of what a Clint Gutherson is, because not a lot of people own him, but Clint's got a huge ceiling, and what I mean by a huge ceiling is the higher end of your score. So a lot of players are consistent. So a good wing fullback will score somewhere between that 50 and 60 mark, so an elite one. So Gutho's probably just off the mark there, but he's capable, especially with his try-scoring heroics. Some days he could ton up, which essentially means 100 points, because he's capable of scoring 3 or 4 tries, because we all know what his support plays like. He can ball play a little bit as well. So he definitely ticks a few boxes. And I guess in terms of, especially heading into Origin 3, in terms of him being a possibility for New South Wales, he's probably a little bit below that as well. So in terms of us worrying about him having to go to Origin, we probably don't have that issue as well there, Joel. So yeah, someone food for thoughts, that's for sure. It's just one of those things that he will be a pod, and then you have to rely on Parramatta continuing on this run, because if they continue this momentum run that they've got now, then yeah, he could be a good play moving forward. It's just kind of thing. It's still a long season, so you might jump on for a small period of time and then maybe offload him come the end of the season, because Para's got that bye in the last round as well. So you just got to be careful loading up on too many Parramatta players. A lot of people have got Hopgood as well. A lot of people went into Brandon Hands last week as well, and probably in the centres, we're probably going to talk about Will Penasini in a sec as well. So a little bit of food for thought in terms of the Parramatta players.
You almost give me a perfect segue there. We'll move into the centre position, but there's one player on my wing fullback that you haven't mentioned yet, but you might mention him here in the centres. So let's go and look into the centres first. I've got my fingers crossed you do anyway.
I'm assuming you're talking about Bailey Simonson.
Well, no, I'm talking about Joey Manu actually. I've got him at the moment as wing fullback. But
gotcha. I thought you meant as from a Parramatta fans, because I know how much you love Parramatta. Yeah, Joey Manu. I am a Parramatta. Joey Manu is the pick. There's no doubt that even though the Roosters aren't in great form, he did return to form in the centres last week. He's been parked at 5'8". We all know that he's not a 5'8". But it's one of those things that he was doing a necessity for the team with Sam Walker injured and just a few other injuries within the team. But yeah, he's the number one guy that you probably want to own. A lot of people do own him at the moment. So pairing him is going to be the thing that I think is going to be the deciding thing. So the thing with centre is it's always kind of a bit of a merry-go-round, because people spend, I reckon, too many trades in that area and they score the least in the entire team. So in terms of prioritising it, I'd probably put the priority on a centre, probably the lowest. But still food for thought in there, because some great kind of prices at the moment. The likes of Matty Tomoko, he's at low 500s. And then we've got Will Penasini, who's absolutely just blowing everyone away. He's high 500s, and he's playing like a veteran at the moment. Some of those moves he put on the Dolphins, especially Ewan Aiken last week, was just veteran stuff, right? So you could be pretty comfortable holding him moving forward, because you just know his star ability. It's one of those things, just that, like I said, just be really cautious with your trades, because you could bring him in and then you don't really want to be sitting someone as higher priced as the likes of both Penasini and Hopgood, not doing anything in that round 27. So just be really careful with that. Just make sure you hold some, so then you could probably just make those last couple of trades for those Parramatta players. But definitely have a look at Will Penasini. I think he's well in there as well. The guy, just having a look at just Origin, I do expect Campbell Graham to move in for Turbo. That would be my only thing. I was going to bring him in last week, but realistically, after Origin 3, after Origin 2 and Turbo getting injured, it just reeks that, he's been 18th man in game 1. Like, for me, he's the best in the NRL anyway. So I think they should give him a game in game 3. Makes sense. Now Latrell's out for game 3 as well. So I think he's the next best up. So I wouldn't be going anywhere near him until after the Origin break. But same thing, they've got to buy in round 26. So you just got to be careful with him as well there, Joel.
Yeah, you do mention the Origin players. I think it's obviously it is best to wait for this game 3 to be one and done, especially some players that could get injuries. You never know with Origin how it could erupt for a dead rubber as such. But Val Holmes, obviously Queensland gun at the moment, North Queensland gun. Is he in calculations for someone to look at?
Absolutely, mate. Like, some of the boys brought him up in the podcast last week because his form over the last month has just been, especially for a guy that's been playing Origin at the same time, has been really picking up, and he's just that elite level. Cowboys going on a run too. Like, they're scoring some tries, and he's a great goal kicker. So anyone that is scoring tries in a team that's got momentum, like himself, Mitchell Moses, Nico Hines, Nathan Cleary, because those added kind of 4 to 6 goals, that's an additional 12 points that you kind of put on. And for a centre, that's even better, because a lot of centres kind of average between that 40 and 50 mark. There's going to be days where when the Cowboys go on a bit of a run, not only is he going to score 40, but then he might have an additional 14 or so in maybe just goal kicks. So, yeah, he's definitely food for thoughts. Relatively cheap. He's kind of that mid 600Ks. It's probably a time where that's probably the kind of max that you want to be paying for a centre at the moment, considering that both Penasini and Tomoko are both cheaper than that. But the Cowboys only have one more bye to come, and it's relatively early in the piece. I think it's about 4 weeks out from the actual finals. So he's probably someone that you probably, if you've got a little bit of depth in the centres, you could probably pick up. Just rest for that 1 week when they've got to buy. But I really like that suggestion, Joel. He's, again, probably someone that's going to be a low owner. So, again, someone that probably stands out in terms of pod potential.
Yeah, I definitely have been looking at him, so that helps me a little bit more as well. You mentioned it, the halves. Obviously, with fantasy, you get the privilege to list halfbacks or fives, whatever way you want to go. It's not a selection. So I feel like there's definitely some must-haves in this category.
Oh, mate, it is the kind of number one spot, right? So, no doubt you have to be having Nico Hines. So, lock and just set and forget him. Shaun Johnson at the moment, having a career year. Like, I've said it plenty of times on the podcast this year. Like, I don't think he's finding vintage form. He never played like this. He's actually found a new groove. Like, this is a different Shaun Johnson that we've never seen before, which I'm like, being a Sharks fan, we got a couple of good years out of him, but then we also got a couple of real dud years out of him. So it's exciting. Got a lot of like mates that are Warriors fans. So it's good to see, especially after a few lean years, him kind of taking them into a bit of a finals charge. So he's doing some awesome things. The thing with the Warriors, they've got a round 22 bye. So what I'm thinking here is, considering the kind of rise in pricing with Shaun Johnson, if you're good with your salary cap, you're probably going to be able to change Shaun Johnson into Nathan Cleary in that bye period. And that also gives you 2 weeks to have a look at Nathan Cleary, because Nathan Cleary is coming off a pretty high-grade hamstring injury. So the reoccurrence rate's pretty high, but it significantly drops after 2 weeks back. So that's obviously courtesy of the NRL physio. I'm not trying to think that I'm a physio or anything like that. But that is kind of like something that the NRL physio does preach, that kind of post 2 games from your hamstring injuries, if you come back, you're pretty good spot. So it gives us, I think they're saying Nathan's back in round 20. So that will give us 2 weeks to have a look at Nathan Cleary and then decide in round 22 if we like what we see. But I think that could be a very, very nice straight swap. And there's a number of Warriors that at the moment I've got 3 Warriors in Tohu Harris, SJ, and then also Charnwick or Clocksgate. So it could be a nice way to kind of just move. If we've got that cash in the bank, then the likes of Isaiah Yeo, could be a straight swap for Panthers. Could be Cleary, Isaiah Yeo, Dylan Edwards. So that's a juicy sort of 3 that you could just straight swap if you've been really good with your bank balance.
Yeah, it is. There any necessarily the cheapies? I feel like the cheapies at the moment is sort of, as we approach this final run, it's sort of, is it as important as it was, say, at the start of the year to find some cheap players?
Yeah, absolutely, because you have to cash down, because probably from about round 21, you're going to be wanting to find your best 17. The best way to find your best 17 is if you've had cash rises all the way through the season. And there's a few different strategies you can take here, Joel. So one of them would be to cash down. A perfect cash down at the moment is someone like Brendan Hance, because he's got a dual positioning. He's relatively cheap in that kind of mid 300Ks, and he can cover hooker and half. But the same thing, what I like about him, with the news of Josh Hodgson having neck surgery, Mitch Rain retiring, there is no one pressing him for his spot. So he's got a legitimate 70 to 80 minute range job every single week, and you're only spending 350K. So you could have someone in your team at the moment that's 600, 650K, cash down, use that 300K to then get a better player from somewhere else. And then you've got some kind of backup in your emergencies, someone like a Brendan Hance that you'll be happy to play, because when he's playing 70, 80 minutes, he's scoring somewhere between that 30 to 45 mark, which with all these buys at the moment, you'll take every day of the week. The other thing that we want to keep an eye on, especially, is what I call beaten down guns. So guys in the past that have been absolute guns, maybe the start of the year at kind of really high prices. So we're talking about the likes of Daly Cherry Evans and Cameron Munster. So both of them have kind of lost. So DCE's lost 250K from his starting price from memory, and then Munster's something around 200K. So the beauty of that is there's no doubt, and DCE has gone a little bit on a slide over the last 3 games, because there's no doubt that Origin's been affecting him. And the other big one was Jake Trbojevic being out. So I was having a look with the boys last night. So when Jake's in the team, he averages 61. When Jake's out of the team, he averages 51. So there's no doubt that his ball playing in the middle, Jake just being that link man, obviously just gives him a little bit more comfort. So Jakey's back this week, so I do expect a bit of a bounce back there for DCE. Turbo being out as well, he's going to be the main man. So expect his hands to be very, very dirty moving forward. Munster, what I love about him is he's just track record. We just know his fantasy relevance year on year. Seems the back end of every year, he just gets on and just, I guess maybe it's just coming off the highs of winning Origin series year after year, right? He just gets on this roll. And then Melbourne seem to be, after a slow start to the year, they've hit a bit of momentum, very similar to Parramatta. I think the last month has been brilliant from them. And they've done it relatively quietly when you think about some of the restings that they've done. Munster didn't play in the last game. And, yeah, I think that's great for his prospects moving forward. I guess after Origin 3, they've got the Roosters a few days after Origin 3. So it'll be interesting to see if they back him up again or maybe just rest him. But if he plays in that game, it's definitely probably the time over the next couple of weeks. And I think it's I call it a shootout. So this week, a DCE versus Munster for my team. So whoever's in a little bit better form, they're both kind of pretty much at the same price, but they both go to Origin 3, of course. But, of course, this week is the week to kind of have a last look at who you really want to bring, because I think in round 2021, you're going to have to bring one of these two guys because their price is too low. They're pretty much basement. They're just pretty much flat out. So it's just one of those buy signals. If you can get one of these two guys, if not both of them, for the run home at 700K, well, you're laughing, I think.
Just making all these mental notes as we go, and I think straight after this, I'm going to get Brendan Hands. So bring it on. Let's go to the big boppers, which me personally,
I wouldn't bring him in until next week.
Oh, sorry, not this week. Yeah, the buy is this week. So
yeah, just don't ever bring in any players on a buy round, because essentially what we've seen in the past is they can get injured at training, like HIAs, because obviously they do a lot of contact work at training. We've seen a couple of the Bulldogs boys actually get concussed during a post sessions over the last couple of weeks. From Harrison Edwards was the last one. So I've seen Kickout do it as well. So just be careful bringing in players that aren't actually on an actual, like a scheduled game week, because you can get burnt pretty hard.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that Edwards one. That absolutely stuffed me that week. So let's talk about the big boppers. Me personally, I've actually found the big boppers quite difficult this year to just get consistent numbers out of in terms of who I have on there, and hopefully you can help us out here. Let's start with the edge forwards. You have two that start each week, and then you can I'd probably recommend you have probably at least one on the bench, maybe two. Where are we looking at here for the edges?
Yeah, well, the Kiwis are doing really well. So the international players are actually doing really well here. The two that I'm picking at the moment, they're in my team at the moment, is Britton Nikora and then Isaiah Papali'i. Both New Zealand guys, you don't have to worry about Origin. Absolute elite level in terms of their play, work rate, great defenders, both have great lines. IPAP, obviously not having Mitchell Moses this year, has hurt him quite a bit. He's also been playing on the wrong side of the field. Last year at Parra, he played on the right. This year he's been playing at the left for the West Tigers. But 2 weeks ago, he switched back to the right for the West Tigers. And then all of a sudden, his scores just went through the roof again. So there's no doubt that Sheensy and Benji have found the right kind of mode for him. Britton Nikora next to Nico Hines. And Nico Hines probably hurts Jesse Ramian a little bit because he does favour hitting Nikora with a short ball more than going outside to Jesse Ramian. So they're two guys I think that you have to get straight away. The other one is John Bateman. Now, especially if you can't afford someone like a David Fifita, because David Fifita is the standout out of all of them. And the reason why is because he scores tries. His work rate has just dramatically improved this year. So before he was just a show player, right, Joel? But now he's actually got a little bit of substance to his game. He takes the tough carries, makes his defense. So he's a lot more well-rounded this year, despite not scoring as many tries. So definitely he's going to be at a bit of a discount come the end of Origin as well. So if you can fit David Fifita in the team, he's definitely going to be the number one. Number two is probably Jermaine Hopgood. The thing with Jermaine is everyone's got him. So he's one of those guys just hold on to because he can just play between the mid and the edge. But like I said, you're not going to be making any headway with Jermaine. He's just going to help you field a team every week until you decide that last round what you want to actually do with him, because just keep another trade up your sleeve because it could give you an advantage come that last round because everyone's going to have Jermaine Hopgood. So some people won't have any trades to get him out, or other people will be able to get him out and take a big advantage because, of course, Jermaine, he comes at kind of that mid 700K. So that's a lot of money that you can probably spend if you can eventually get him out as well. So he's probably the second pick, Britton and IPAP, and then also you've got Johnny Bateman. So they're probably your next best bits. So those international guys always come in handy. Don't have to worry about Origin or anything like that. They've been hitting huge numbers. They're at great prices as well. Play round 19 buy. So I think they're your kind of main sticks moving forward. Probably stick away from even some of these talented guys like your Keon Kolomatangis. The reason why is they've got 2 more buys to come. So that's also the advantage of the Tigers and Sharks guys. You know, staying healthy, touch wood, and suspensions, they play all the way through there, Joel, while the other guys can miss 1 to 2 games. So that's a massive advantage, especially if you're paying the same price.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about Koloamatangi, so you've helped me out there. Olakuatu, is there any your recommendations with Olakuatu?
Yeah, he's a real interesting one. He's probably undervalued at the moment because he went through a bit of a lull in form as well. So he's an interesting one. So they've only got 1 more buy to go. So he's someone that is probably a little bit underpriced as well. And I know that his numbers do go up when Turbo doesn't play because I think they favour going to DCE on the right. And obviously he becomes a big strike weapon. Probably the one that is going right under the radar is probably Liam Martin. So obviously because he started the season really well with 2 strong scores, then he started hurting his hammies. So they kind of worked him back from in a bit of a middle rotation there for a period of about 10 games. So that's obviously shrunk his price and then obviously his average as well. But now over the Origin period, he's really picked up his form. His last game against the Roosters, he scored like a 55 in 65 minutes. So he's at low 500K, so which I do think for his value, for his kind of skill set, and you think about maybe timing it in terms of him, I think he's about a couple of 100K undervalued. And if you can time it right and maybe bring him back when Nathan Cleary's back, I think their combination on the right edge could be something explosive for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, I agree with that one 100% there. Middles. So we've got a couple of big boppers. You obviously got your Payne Haas is up there. People, as you said, could often play Hopgood up the middle as well. Who are the other standouts in this position?
Yeah, it's another interesting position because, like you said, a couple of minutes ago about consistency and just finding that across the board. Like we all thought Joseph Tarpany was going to be the main guy after his career year last year, but he's just struggled to kind of rebuild back on that. I know that off the field he's had a kid and all sorts of different things happening, so maybe that's affected him a little bit like that. But for me, I've still got Tarpany. Probably the one that's really surprised everyone's been Jack de Belin because we never expected him to play this 80-minute role week in, week out. So he's hitting some really great scores week on week. So he's definitely probably the number 2 pick behind Payne Haas. And then it's just a shootout for that third. Tohu Harris is always very, very good. The guy that's probably really keeper level is it just depends on how many Penrith players you actually want to bring in at the moment. So that's Isaiah Yeo as well, because one guy I forgot to mention in the centers is Isaac Tungo as well. So he's very much underpriced as well. So I'd probably pick between him and Will Pinasini to be a finishing center because I think they're both just playing a really high-scoring teams and teams that will be pushing for that final spot. And they're just guys that they can find the try line, put other people over. So I would like to maybe hold one of those 2 moving forward. And then in terms of these big boppers, yeah, it's a very interesting one. Like I've held the guy that's really surprised me has been Nelson Asofa Solomona, big Nas. And I think he's about to hit a jewel as well because he's playing in the edge now, replacing Eli Katoa. And his combination there with Jerome Hughes, he's just a handful. He can offload. He just tackle. When you're 6'6" and you're 140 kilos, it's so easy for you to tackle break. And he's got quite a bit of speed for a big fella as well. Gets through his defense. So he's someone that's probably on the cheaper. He's at the moment my 18th man. Been a little bit disappointed with James Fisher-Harris. Because coming into the season, I did rate him as the best prop in the game. But in terms of a fantasy sense, that doesn't always translate. So he's kind of hitting that mid-40s at the moment, but he doesn't really have that kind of skill set of maybe like a Payne Haas who can offload for days. You've got, I know that doesn't get scored, but someone like a Junior Paolo, who, can ball play in the middle. He's just that great link. So despite being a big man, he's got those great hands. So despite the fact that he does, he brings a lot to the table in an NRL sense, it doesn't always translate into NRL fantasy. So that's probably another trap, especially for the young players, that sometimes your best NRL players aren't essentially your best NRL fantasy players because there's a lot of things that don't get scored. So there's no doubt that Fish brings an intensity to the game, some leadership, some, like I said, intensity, leadership that doesn't get scored in an NRL front. But of course, it has a massive impact on the field. So just be careful that. Just have a look, especially if you're just starting late and you kind of want to pick it up late and then maybe have a crack next year. Just have a look at how the scoring is done because, like I said, there's a lot of good things that don't get scored, but essentially just be careful that a lot of good NRL players don't essentially always make up good NRL fantasy players.
Yeah, the last position here is the hookers, and that's the only position that fantasy do where it's only the one player you can pick to start in the run-on squad. First question about the hookers would be, do you recommend owning more than one in your all-around squad? And secondly, the players who stand out in their position.
Yeah, it's a great question. Like before, back in the day, we're talking about last year, like we'd probably have 3 or 4 in the squad. Yeah. But now, like moving forward, I'm thinking like the standout's Harry Grant. And there's no doubt that his skill set and his defensive work rate puts him so far ahead of everyone else. It's been managed over the last 3 weeks, which has been great because his price has shrunk a little bit. And that always kind of happens during the origin period because, of course, they're backing up, right, Joel? So in terms of output, they're never going to be the same. But, yeah, I'm thinking about holding 2. I'm thinking about bringing Harry Grant in round 20. At the moment, I've got Jake Turpin, I've got Tanner Boyd, and then I've got Brendan Hands. But I think after kind of the round 19 bye, like Jake Turpin, there's chat that Cheese is back in round 20. I don't think Cheese will start in front of him, but I do expect Cheese to take some of his minutes. So there's no doubt that Jake Turpin needs 70 to 80 minutes to be relevant. So it's a great time anyway. We've made some great cash. We made about 300K from him, so we can move him on. And then we've got Tanner Boyd, who's also made some great cash from the start. Does have a duel. And then, of course, Titans don't have any more buys, which makes it handy. But, of course, you're going to fall behind because most people are going to have Harry Grant. Harry Grant will average somewhere like a 60, 65. Tanner Boyd would probably hit somewhere between that 45 to 50. So it's a big gap between them, and their prices aren't that much different. We're talking about 80K at the moment. So I think it's a great investment to pretty much trade up, get that upgrade up. But in terms of anyone else, like the problem is these buys because your next best hookers in terms of 2 and 3, you've got Damien Cook, and then he's still got 2 buys to go. And then you've also got Reece Robson, who they've said is carrying a bit of hamstring tightness from playing obviously 2 games last week, and he's got 2 buys to go as well. We've only got 10 games to go, so that's literally 20% of the season. Harry Grant's only got that 1 bye to go, and then, of course, he's the best. So you've got to get Harry Grant for the run home, and then I'll pair him with a cash down with Brendan Hands, and then keep a couple of trades up your sleeve just in case injuries happen. If injuries do happen, then you can use Hands as your backup, and if something did happen to Harry Grant, then you can make a decision whether you want to go to a Cookie or Robson for the run home as well.
And there's been a lot of talk over the last few weeks about Jerry Marshall-King at the Dolphins. Had a pretty great year so far, nailed down his hooker position and being one of the well-known hookers in the game. Is he around about someone you can go for, let's say, if you can't afford a Harry Grant?
He's probably a trade out now, Joel. So, like you said, his season to start has been scintillating. Like, if they pick a New Zealand team tomorrow, I think he's the New Zealand hooker ahead of Brandon Smith because his form at the moment has been just great, but he's picked up that shoulder injury. So over the last month, he's missed 2 games, and then he got a reduced game as well. So similar from what I'm reading to the AC joint injury last year to Payne Haas. So very much a pain management issue, but of course it can be an issue which keeps you out from from time to time because you do need to rest. So that'll be the issue bringing in Jeremy Marshall-King at the moment, is the fact that you could miss him from week to week. So moving forward, like, we want to make some, because trades are such on a limited side, you want to be kind of making some really good calculated trades. And the fact that we do know that he's carrying the injury probably puts him down the pecking order, despite the fact that we do know his upside in terms of his talent and kind of what he brought at the start of the season. He'd be a very left field player, especially right now at the start of the year, like especially during the Origin. He's another guy during the Origin period that we expected to thrive, but it was just timing here, Joel. Like, it was just unfortunate with the injury. So he'd be someone that I'll probably be staying away from, only because of the fact that he could be out week to week.
Yeah, a couple of rapid fire questions for you before I let you go. In terms of how many is too many, so this question relates to players in a team and how many you want to have in your 17 or your squad. Is there sort of a limit that you would recommend keeping to? I know, like you've mentioned, the Sharks players. Would you say maybe like 3 or 4, not go over that, or it's sort of a blanket rule that whatever you want to do, go for it?
Yeah, it's probably, the rules have probably changed a touch because of the buys, because of the fact that you've got the likes of the Sharks, Titans, and Tigers that have now finished their buys. They're probably the players that you want to prioritize right now moving forward, because effectively, as long as they're fit and they're staying out of trouble, they're going to be playing week after week. Every other team, they're going to be having at least one other buy. So you would prioritize the key gun players from that team. And we're very fortunate, right? Because the Tigers have a couple in Bateman and Isaiah Papali'i. The Sharks have an obvious one in Nico Hines and also Britton Nakora. And then you've got the Titans as well, because they've got Fafita. They've got Tino. There's probably another one I should have mentioned in the mid rotation. Of course, the thing with Tino, he's just a bit of a walking suspension in the making, because he always seems to be doing nigglies, getting into fights. We saw what happened with Api Coruscant before that with Reed Marnie. So there's always a chance that because of his aggressive style of play, that he'd probably kind of walking the tightrope a little bit in terms of suspensions. So he's probably someone that, again.
So, yeah, I feel like with game 3 coming up as well, and we saw how that sort of got fired up towards the end of game 2, and we know what Tino's like. If you don't have him yet, I'd probably recommend wait until after game 3 just to see if it kicks off, and we know Tino will be straight in there if it does.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, mate, because, yeah, like you said, if it kicks off, I'm sure that Tino will be front and center, and he'll be throwing punches. He's not scared. We saw the last time that him and Huss, they faced off, they went to the bin. So there's no doubt there's a little bit of bad blood. They probably got built up more after the Titans beat the Broncos over the weekend. So there's no doubt that it could be a fiery game 3. So I think that's very, very valuable advice there. But yeah, it's just got to be very careful, because even in the back end, we spoke about Ivan Cleary having a tendency to rest players. So if you have 5 Penrith players, you essentially might have to play one short if you don't have enough trades to get one of them out. So yeah, I think it's valuable. I probably wouldn't go above 3 players. If you can kind of space it out where you've got 2 players from each team, I think you're in a very comfortable situation, because with NRL fantasy, especially for the newbies, you've got 21 players in your squad. So essentially you do have 4 extra players that you don't play each week. But and I guess during this Origin period, we've had multiple buys in some of the weeks. But moving past round 20, there's only going to be a single buy all the way into the back end of the year. So you've got a little bit more comfort level in terms of using your 21 players productively across the rest of the season.
Just the final question here, you've sort of touched on it as we've gone today, just on the Origin guns that are obviously players that people want to bring in, like your Harry Grants. You've spoken about like your Munsters, your Cherry Evans perhaps. We've just spoken about Tino. If players don't have these players yet because they've been holding out through the Origin period, is it sort of now you start to sift these back in and take a bullet for the next time they're out, or do you still wait until Origin 3 is done or one and done, and then start bringing all these players back? Because you got 3 or 4. You can do a maximum of 3 or 4 trades a week.
4.
4. So you don't want to be having to bring too many in on the 1 week.
Yeah, it's a great question. And what I'd recommend is, at the moment, I've only got 1 Origin player in my team. And I did that intentionally because it's always bad, especially you're just waiting for players to pull out post-Origin. So that would be my concern about bringing in Origin players now, because you've got no idea what their club coach wants them to do. Because at the end of the day, the club coaches aren't here for your fantasy team. They're here to protect their team and try to give them the best run for for the premiership, right? So my recommendation right now, you should be having a look and planning how you're going to raise the money to buy them post-Origin. So it's one of those things that we've seen a lot of players get injured post-Origin as well. So sometimes it's good to maybe wait a week. So what we're talking about this time is we've only got one Origin game to go. So obviously round 19, none of the teams have their Origin players. Round 20, they all back up. So probably it could be the key week, round 21, if you want a little bit more certainty around their health and fitness, to bring them in there. But then you've got 4 weeks to plan between now, which is round 18, to that round 21. You've got that period of time to now do some cash downs, think about players that you will be the ones to get traded out for these big guns. But in the run home, you mentioned a few of them. I think the key essentials, Harry Grant, one of Cameron Munster and Daly Cherry Evans, David Fafita. If you've got those nucleus and you're able to afford to bring back Nathan Cleary, I think you're going to be in a very good run home. Have a look at someone like that's probably a little bit cheaper. That is an Origin gun. Your likes of Liam Martin. Now, after the suspension of Reece Walsh, I think that he's a massive trade out because you just can't be parking him on the sidelines for that long. Also, I think he lost a little bit of momentum in the fantasy front anyway because of kind of that Origin period. I don't like first-year rookies as well. We saw it with Paddy Carrigan last year, kind of dipping in the back end of the year. So just be careful there. Have a look at the teams that do have the bye on the way home as well. So if you've got 2 players that are pretty much neck and neck and one of them play an extra game, well, that's a simple decision. So go with a player that obviously will be backing up. From here, from memory, round 20, the Dragons, Raiders, and also Dragons, Raiders, and Souths have a bye. Round 21, the Dolphins have a bye. Round 22, Warriors have a bye. 23 is the Dogs. 24 is Broncos. 25 is... Who's in 25? 26, I know, is Souths, and then 27 is Para.
You're just showing off now.
So that's, to be honest, Joel, that's only because I was looking at some stuff that I was writing up before we jumped on. So I've got a terrible memory. I just got to remember who's in 25. Cowboys are the 20.
Yeah.
So just have a look. So I've just given you the draw there, guys. So try to prioritize players that aren't in the kind of like last 7. If worst comes to worst, it's just 1 week. But if you've got 2 players that are going neck to neck, try to prioritize those clubs that have already had those buys.
That's all we've got time for. I need to go and get my team sorted out because I've got a lot of mental notes that I've got to keep. And as I'm like you, my memory's shot. So while it's still fresh, I need to go and make these changes. TK, really appreciate your time. As I said before, guys, please jump on, go give his podcast a listen. As he's mentioned, there is plenty out there for everyone to listen to, no matter what it is that you like and want to listen to. Please go and give the pages a like on the social media. Get involved with your social media content as well. Give some likes, get some comments in there. TK, thanks once again for joining. Looking forward to the run home of fantasy.
No, I appreciate having me, Joel. It's been great to have a chat about NRL, and just reach out anytime that you want to have a chat, mate. And thanks to the audience for listening, and keep supporting League of Inches because it's always some great news that you bring out, especially on your Instagram page. I always get some great breaking news, mate. So keep up the great work, mate.
Try my best. The missus loves me being on the phone 24/7. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day whenever you listen.